to the Remo. If anyone wants to try it out, to jump over to Remo and give it a shot, you're welcome to. And if you miss a couple lines, you'll be able to figure it out. So again, thank you so much, everyone, for joining. This year, the complicated Yontif of Pesach becomes doubly complicated because the day before Pesach, Erev Pesach, is Shabbat. And just as a couple introductory comments, Shabbat and Yontif are both holy days in which we refrain from creative labors, but they're fundamentally different. On Shabbat, we commemorate the creation of the world in 6 days and the fact that Hashem rested on the seventh day, and so too, we rest on the seventh day. Yontif, however, doesn't celebrate creation, but rather it celebrates the redemption of the Jewish people over the course of history. Now there's an interesting difference between Shabbat and Yontif, which is that Shabbat is automatically, okay, and the difference between Shabbat and Yontif is that Shabbat is automatically holy every 7 days, whether we like it or not. For this reason, in the Kiddush and in Tefillah, we say, Baruch atah Hashem, Mikadesh HaShabbat. Blessed is Hashem, who sanctifies the Shabbat. Yes, there's a responsibility upon every single Jew to observe Shabbat. We also have a mitzvah, a Torah mitzvah of making Kiddush on Shabbat. But whether we like it or not, the seventh day of every week is infused with that holiness of Shabbat. And for that reason, we say, blessed is Hashem, who's Mekadesh HaShabbat, who sanctifies the day himself. Yontif, in contrast, whether it's Pesach, Shavuot, or Sukkot, Yontif is established by the Torah, but there's a partnership with the Jewish people. Because the very first mitzvah that's given to the Jewish people is Kiddush HaChodesh, is sanctifying the month. And the Beis Din, the Jewish court, has that role, at least in the days when there was an official Beit Din that was meeting a couple thousand years ago for hundreds and hundreds of years. So the Beis Din sanctified the month, which means that we were involved in the process. The Beis Din, which was, of course, led by Jewish scholars, rabbis, decided on when the month began, and therefore that determined when Pesach occurred, and when Shavuot occurred, and when Sukkot occurred. And for this reason, in the Kiddush and in Tefillah, we don't say Baruch atah Hashem Mekadesh HaYontif. We don't say Baruch atah Hashem Mekadesh HaZmanim. But we say Baruch atah Hashem, blessed is Hashem, who's Mekadesh Yisrael v'Hazmanim. Hashem sanctifies the Jewish people and the calendar. And the rabbis intended with that blessing to mean that Hashem sanctifies the Jewish people and gives us the ability, gives us the capacity to sanctify the calendar. And the reason for this is that by Shabbat, it's all about Hashem because Hashem created the world. Yes, we emulate Hashem by being creative, but after all is said and done, Shabbat is about creation of the world, which was all about Hashem. But in redemption, there is a partnership between Hashem and the Jewish people. We have to take the initiative. We have to take the bull by the horns, and then Hashem assists us in our effort. So this is just as a kind of couple introductory comments in terms of this interesting juxtaposition and this bumping up of Shabbat and Yontif. It's not just like a 3-day Yontif. It's not just 3 days of holy days, but actually there are different characters of Shabbat on the one hand, which celebrates creation, and the Torah also, by the way, was given on Shabbat. And we believe that we describe the future as a day that's going to be completely Shabbat. For this reason, that's why Marev of Shabbat has the theme of creation in the Shemona Esrei. Shachrit on Shabbat has the theme of the giving of the Torah, which occurred on Shabbat, and that's when Hashem commanded us to keep Shabbat. And in Mincha, we talk about the time in the future when there's going to be the redemption of the Jewish people, and there's going to be a Yom Shekulo Shabbat, the day of spiritual rest for the entire world and all of humanity. So that's Shabbat. Shabbat is really about creation and these couple other themes. And Yontif, on the other hand, and Pesach, of course, is that original redemption of the Jewish people. So the question is this year, how do we navigate this juxtaposition of Shabbat and Pesach? And the key is, of course, that we have to respect both Shabbat and Pesach. And what's nice about these halachic conundrums is that it gives us an opportunity to remind us of concepts and laws that we may tend to otherwise overlook during the rest of the year. And that's why I wanted to jump right into the concept and requirement for every single Jew, man and woman, to have 3 meals on Shabbat. Over the course of the year, some people are stringent and careful about this, and of course, I encourage you to do so. But other people are lenient. They don't really give it so much thought to have the 3rd meal on Shabbat. But this year, with Shabbat leading into Pesach, so everyone gets all excited. There's this conundrum, there's this riddle. How are we going to fulfill the mitzvah of 3 meals? And what's the problem? What's the reason why this is an issue? The reason why it's an issue is because many opinions say that the ideal way to fulfill the mitzvah of Shalosh Shudas is with bread or hamotzi, to begin with hamotzi. Secondly, the majority opinion is that you're supposed to have the Shalosh Shudas, the 3rd meal on Shabbat, you're supposed to have it in the afternoon. And the way the Rambam presents it is in a very, very interesting fashion, where he says that it's based on the principle of Chatzi LaHashem and Chatzi Lachem. That in life, and in our celebration of the holiday, celebration of Shabbat, we dedicate ourselves to Hashem, but we also recognize our needs and our desire for enjoyment in a halachically permitted way, of course. And so the Gemara says actually by Shavuot, it says everyone agrees there has to be the dimension of lachem, that we have to be concerned about our enjoyment on Shavuot. Why? Because the Torah was given on Shavuot, and the Torah is given for our benefit. So everyone agrees that there's this dimension of lachem. And so the Gemara says that this principle of Chatzi LaHashem, Chatzi Lachem means that half the day should be for Hashem by davening and by learning and by spiritual matters. And then half the day is Lachem, which is that you're allowed to and encourage, and there's actually a mitzvah on Shabbat and Yantiv to eat and to drink and to enjoy and to enjoy and delight in the Shabbat. And the way the Rambam lays it out, he says, based on this principle, you can lay out the schedule for the day of Shabbat on every Shabbat of the year. This is every Shabbat now. He says that in the evening you daven Mariv, and then you have the meal, right? So we daven Kabbalat Shabbat and Mariv, and then we eat a meal. So it's half for Hashem and half for Lachem. And then in the morning, so we daven Shachar and Kriyat Torah and Musaf. So that's all LaHashem. And then we make Kiddush and we have a meal, which is Lachem, which is for our benefit and our enjoyment. And then we daven Mincha, and then after Mincha, that's when you have the 3rd meal of Shabbat. And there's a difference of opinion whether that 3rd meal should be after you daven Mincha or before you daven Mincha, but according to most opinions, it should be during the time of Mincha, namely Shabbat afternoon. So the problem is that, wait a second, so if you're supposed to have the meal in the afternoon, and if you're supposed to begin the meal with hamotzi, because ideally you're supposed to start it with either bread or matzah, right, the hamotzi, and parenthetically, of course, we know that there's a concept of having lechem mishnah, right? We have a double portion of bread for each meal of Shabbat. Why do we do that? Because the man fell, a double portion of man in the wilderness fell for the Jewish people. And so to commemorate the double portion, that's why we have a double roll at the for each Shabbat meal. We cover the challah, right? We cover the challah when we make Kiddush. One reason for that is because usually you start the meal with bread, but you're making Kiddush, so the wine is preceding the bread. So you kind of, out of respect to the challah, you don't want to embarrass the challah, you don't want to insult it, kind of like, in such a direct, blatant way, so you cover the challah. But another reason given as to why we cover the challah is because it's to remember the man. Because the man was covered on the bottom, and it was covered with a layer on top, the Torah seems to suggest. And so at the Shabbat meal, what we do is we have the double portion, the 2 rolls. I'm talking about a regular Shabbat now. We have 2 rolls to remember the double portion that fell on Friday. and we cover it at the bottom, cover it at the top, right? You have the challah board, or whatever, the challah tray, and you have a challah cover to remember, right? To remember the man in the wilderness. Parenthetically, the story is told. It's told as a true story about the man who walks into his home with a guest, and the table is not set. The challah is not on the table, and the wine's not on the table. Table's not set, and the man, gets he raised his voice to his wife, upset as to why the house wasn't ready. And the guest, softly reminded his friend and said that the reason why we cover the challah is because we don't want to embarrass the challah. And the idea of that is to teach us to be extra careful in not embarrassing other people, right? If we're so careful not to embarrass challah, so all the more so we should be careful not to embarrass your wife, your loved ones, and other people. But aside from that reason, one of the main reasons of covering the challah is for the man, is to remember the man in the wilderness. So the question is now, let's get now into like the issues. What do you do on the Shabbat prior to Pesach? Because you can't, in the afternoon, you're not allowed to have chametz. The halacha is, like every year, chametz may not be eaten after the conclusion of the 4th hour on Erev Pesach. This means that the last time for eating chametz is Shabbat morning, the day before Pesach, and Shabbat morning around 10:30. So you certainly can't have bread in the afternoon, on Shabbat afternoon prior to Pesach. You're also not allowed to have matzah the entire day of Erev Pesach. And the reason for that is because we want to promote the excitement for this special mitzvah of eating the matzah at the Seder. And that's why there's actually a prohibition. You're not supposed to have matzah the day before Pesach. Some have the custom to refrain from eating matzah from Rosh Chodesh Nisan, says the Mishnah Berurah. And then there's a custom out there, and in my family, this is what the way I was raised, is that we refrain from having matzah all 30 days prior to Pesach. But the main prohibition is not to have matzah the day before Pesach. So you can't have chametz after 4 hours of the morning. You can't have matzah the entirety of the day because we're getting all excited about eating the matzah at the Seder table. And number 3 is that according to most opinions, you're not allowed to eat egg matzah in the afternoon. I'll come back to the issue of egg matzah. Okay, so then what does a person do in the for the shalosh shudas? Now, so the solution is that for the 3 meals, this is what you do, and then what I'm going to do after I talk about the 3 meals, just because I find this to be an interesting topic. I'm going to try to take you more chronologically from Thursday to Friday to Shabbat, until the Seder, to do it in that fashion. By the way, as many of you know, I sent out a guide that covers a lot of these issues. Of Erev Pesach that occurs on Shabbat, and we sent that out by email. So I encourage you to, check out and access that guide if you have any questions, you want to review these issues. If you don't know how to access this, you could send an email to me and I will get that to you. So how does one do the 3 meals on Shabbat? So the Friday night meal is eaten as usual, and should begin with challah or egg matzah. On Shabbat morning, and we'll talk more about in terms of what do you do with the crumbs and the dishes and cleaning up. But at least just in terms of fulfilling the meals, the 3 meals of Shabbat. So the Friday night meal is eaten as usual and begins with challah or egg matzah. On Shabbat morning, so then we're going to daven earlier at Beth Jacob than usual, than every Shabbat. So that's a sufficient time to eat your meal, your second meal of Shabbat, first meal of Shabbat morning. And that could begin with challah or egg matzah. And if you are starting it with challah or egg matzah, then you need to complete that. You need to complete the challah or the egg matzah prior to 10:31 a.m. And while chametz may not be eaten after 10:31 a.m., and the minhag is, and the custom is, according to most opinions, that you can't even eat egg matzah after 10:31 a.m. So, but the meal itself can continue with kosher Pesach foods beyond that time of 10:30. So regarding the third meal, you have two options. One option, the Ramah says, Ramosha Isserlis, Ashkenazic authority in the 1500s, he says it's very simple. He says, do the meal at the proper time in the afternoon, but be lenient to follow those positions that don't require bread, matzah, or egg matzah for shalosh shudas. And so what the Ramah says, eat the meal in the afternoon, and you can have fruit, meat, or fish. And so the benefit of this approach is that the meal is being eaten in the afternoon, which is the ideal time, and it's relying on those opinions that the third meal can be fulfilled without hamotzi. And it's preferable that this small meal should be completed prior to 4 p.m. So you could have it at 12 p.m., you could have it at 1 p.m., you could have it at 2 p.m., you could have any time you want as you work out your schedule. And the reason is because there's a regular rule, there's a general rule when it comes to Shabbat and Yantif, that you want to come into Shabbat and Yantif with an appetite. And so already a few hours before the end of the day, 3 hours, 3 halachic hours before the end of the day, so you're not supposed to have a big, a meal. All right, if you want to have snacks, you want to have, kosher Pesach snacks, or a bite of meatballs or whatever it is, you can have that anytime. But in terms of having a meal, so then even if it's a small meal, it's preferable to complete that meal prior to the conclusion of the 9th hour of the day. So it's 3/4 of the day is completed. And that corresponds, it's a longer day now with the clocks having changed, that corresponds to approximately 4 p.m. So that's one option. Eat the meal in the afternoon and have fruit, meat, or fish. The second option is to divide the morning meal into two. And it's fun even talking about this, and people get they get excited about fulfilling the mitzvah of shalosh shudas. And as I said before, I think part of the idea of discussing these issues is not just to fulfill the mitzvahs properly on March 27th on Erev Pesach, but it kind of highlights a lot of different nuances and details that really apply during the course of the year. So the other option is to divide the morning meal into two, and this is what you do. So we're going to be davening 7:30 in Beth Jacob, 7:30 in Jacob's Garden, probably 7:45 in Chappelle Sanctuary. We're going to finish by 9:15. Let's say you're davening in Jacob's Garden, you finish 9 o'clock. You're home. You're home by 9:15 or so. So you divide the morning meal into two. You make kiddush. You wash. You make hamotzi. You eat at least the volume of an egg of challah or egg matzah. If you'd like, you can have a small course of food. And you say birchat hamazon. Now you're wondering, I know you're asking, you're saying, what, Rabbi, a Jewish meal that just has one course? Maybe it doesn't have the status of a Jewish meal. Maybe people are going to question our Jewish identity if we only have a little bit for the meal. The halacha is that all you have to have is just an egg, basically, you have a small challah roll, and you're fine. If it's a big challah roll, you already have a half or 2/3 of that challah roll, 3/4 of the challah roll. That's sufficient. You have either gefilte fish with it, or you have whatever you want to have with that, and you say birchat hamazon. Then you take a break for 15 minutes, in which you could learn or go for a walk outside. And why do I say learn? Because what else would you do? Right? Of course, right? Everyone uses their spare time to do some learning. And so you take 15 minutes break. And then at that point, so it's now 9:45, right? It's now 9:45, it's 9:50, 9:55, whenever it is. And you wash, you make hamotzi again, you again eat a little, a portion of challah or egg matzah, and you make sure to complete the eating of chametz prior to 10:31 a.m. And and then we'll get back to in terms of right then. Well, we'll just mention quickly. Then you of course you clear the table in the house of any remaining chametz, and you're going to recite the kol chamira. We're going to talk about in a moment prior to 11:45 a.m. But the benefit of this approach is that the third meal is being done with hamotzi, and you're making a point that even though during the year maybe you're not careful about it, but now you're showing that really you want to be careful about it. And especially with Pesach coming up, we want to do mitzvahs in the best possible way to beautify the mitzvah. So the benefit of this approach is that you're doing the third meal with hamotzi, and it's relying on those opinions that say you can fulfill the mitzvah of shalosh shudas, of sudash shlishit, in the morning. And certainly, if you want to fulfill all opinions, and you want to be mahadran min a mahadran, and if you want to impress your relatives in Lakewood or in or in Bnei Brak, right? You can say you're going to do both. You're going to do both options. You're going to divide the morning meal into two, and then you're going to also have a little bit of fruit, meat, or fish in the afternoon. Number one, because you're a halachic maximalist. Number two, you want to impress your relatives, or number three, of course, you like eating. So for one or more of those reasons, you want to do both. You could do both opinions, but you don't have to. I'm not encouraging you to feel obligated to do both options. But that's the conundrum of shalosh shudas, and that's a little bit of a guide how to fulfill the three meals on Pesach. Let's take a step back and start with Thursday. When is Tanit B'chorim this year? With Erev Pesach occurring on Shabbat, so the fast is not observed on Shabbat because we generally do not fast on Shabbat, and the fast is also not observed on Friday because we want to avoid the situation of entering into Shabbat while fasting. So what we do this year is, and so the kind of the Pesach experience begins on Thursday. Tanis B'chorim is observed on Thursday, right? So all the firstborn, all the firstborn males, right? So there's this custom of fasting on the day before Pesach. This year we're going to do it not the day before Pesach, not 2 days before Pesach, but actually it's it's the third day. It's the third day before Pesach on Thursday, and like we do in other years, and in accordance with the widespread custom, we'll make a siyum after Shachrit. And to enable participants to partake of a Sudat mitzvah, and that'll serve, once they participate in the siyum and they have that little meal after the siyum, so then that's considered a break, a break of the fast, and then they're able to eat during the rest of the day. If one can do so safely, they should hear the siyum, participate in the siyum in person. But if you're not able to participate in person this year because of the unusual circumstances, I'm telling people that they can participate in the siyum by Zoom. The next thing that you have to be aware of when it comes to Pesach this year is bedikat chametz. So customarily, the bedika is achieved by searching one's home by candlelight the night of the 14th of Nisan, the evening prior to Pesach. The problem is that you all know that you can't light or carry candles on Friday night. So so you can't do the bedika on Friday night, and also it's not advisable or ideal to do the bedika on Friday morning or during the daytime, because Chazal said you should do the bedikas chametz always at night. The rabbis established that halacha for two reasons. Number one, for a practical utilitarian purpose, which is that people tend to be home at night. And the rabbis were concerned about people's schedules, believe it or not. And the second reason why bedikat chametz is at night is because that's when candlelight is most effective. And the rabbis were very, very supportive and encouraged people to use candles to search the house for chametz, and candlelight is most effective at night. So what we do this year is that we perform the bedika on Thursday night, the night of the 13th of Nisan, with all the regular customs associated with it. So like every year, we say the bracha of al biur chametz prior to beginning the search. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam al biur chametz. The purpose of the bedika is to lead to the elimination, to the biur of chametz, and the bracha is recited accordingly with that formula. We use a candle. I encourage you, if you can, to use a flashlight to supplement. And at the conclusion of the search, then you recite the bittul, the nullification of chametz, using the formula of kol chamira. And the bedika should be done Thursday night after nightfall, which is approximately 7:50. When do we perform biur chametz? Typically, we perform biur chametz, the destruction of the chametz, again, right, the morning prior to Pesach. And the problem is, this is the debate between Rabbi Yehuda and the Rabbanan. The Rabbanan say you can destroy chametz by just throwing it into the wind and eliminating it that way. And Rabbi Yehuda disagrees and says that no, that a person must do their best to burn the chametz. When you burn the chametz, this is in fulfillment of a Torah mitzvah of what's called tashbitu. Ach biyom harishon tashbitu suor mibatechem. On the first day, and the rabbis understood that to mean the day prior to Pesach. On the day prior to Pesach, so we have to do everything we can to eliminate the chametz from our homes. And the rabbis say you could do it this way. Rabbi Yehuda says you should do it through burning, which is not permitted on Shabbat. Therefore, this year, so Tanit Bechorim is Thursday, Bedikat Chametz is Thursday night, and Biur Chametz, the burning of the chametz, takes place Friday morning. The rabbis have been working. I've been speaking with a number of other community rabbis to try to see if we can arrange a community biur, as we've done in years past. So far, we have not been successful in securing a location, especially with all the restrictions and complications of this period of time. Of course, we'll let you know if something does develop. Of course, we'll let you know. But biur chametz, you're supposed to, you're supposed to burn a small portion of chametz, the 10 pieces of bread that you put out for the bedika. So that's the bread, maybe a little bit more, that you burn. How you go ahead and burn the chametz, we could talk about another time. If it's but you have to be very, very careful, to burn the chametz safely. Whether you do it, on your grill or you do it in another spot. We'll try to give if there's no community biur, maybe we'll try to give a few guidelines as to burning the chametz in a safe fashion. But however you do it, and again, hopefully we will have this community opportunity to do it. This year we destroy the chametz on Friday morning prior to the conclusion of the 5th hour, before 11:45 a.m. Why before the 5th hour? I mean, we're 30 hours. We're 30 hours prior to Pesach. So why are we so careful to complete the destruction of chametz 30 hours prior to Pesach? And let me clarify for now, for the moment, let me clarify something important. That with all the complications of Erev Pesach that occurs on Shabbos, when it comes to eating chametz and benefiting from chametz and owning chametz, the law is the same. You're allowed to eat chametz until 4 hours of the day prior to Pesach, or to put it another way, right? To put it another way, chametz may not be eaten after the conclusion of the 4th hour, and that means that the last time for eating chametz is Shabbat morning at 10:31 a.m. That's important, with all the other nuances and dividing your shalashidus into two, and all the different details that we're trying to navigate. And we're really enjoying this discussion, and we're going to try to figure out how to do this. We got this, but there's certain principles that you kind of you can't forget the basic principles. Sometimes you get caught up in all these different nuances, and we get confused about the basic principles. You're allowed to eat chametz until Shabbat morning, 10:31, and that's like every year. Okay. Also, like every year, chametz may no longer be in your possession. You're not allowed to own chametz after the conclusion of the 5th hour on Erev Pesach, and that corresponds to Shabbat morning at 11:45 a.m. So those principles are the same this year as every other year. The only unusual thing about it is that it happens on Shabbos. So the deadline for eating chametz takes place on Shabbos morning 10:30, and the deadline for owning chametz is Shabbat morning 11:45. And so prior to that time, and that's what we're going to talk a little bit more about right now, that now prior to that time, you have to dispose, you have to sell, you have to nullify the chametz to make sure that you no longer halachically own any chametz after that time. So if that's the case, so why did I just say that you have to do biur chametz before 11:45 a.m.? Why can't I burn the chametz? I know I can't burn the chametz on Shabbat, but why can't I burn the chametz Friday afternoon? And the reason is that that even though chametz may still be owned and eaten on Friday afternoon and also Shabbat morning, but we burn the chametz on Friday morning before the 5th hour, like other years. And the reason for doing this is that the rabbis wanted to prevent confusion for other years. So this way we know the burning of the chametz is always before the 5th hour of the day. So to prevent confusion, they kept it even when it's on Friday, even though you really, you can really burn the chametz anytime during the day, but the rabbi said you should burn it at the same time to prevent any confusion in future years. After the burning, okay, so any remaining chametz that will be eaten the rest of Friday and through Shabbat morning should be placed in a secure location or box reserved for this purpose. Now you may choose to not have any chametz in your possession after that time. It depends upon your personality. If you're more risk averse, conservative personality, and you get nervous about the Pesach and nervous about the chametz, you might say, you know what, after the burning of the chametz on Friday morning, we're not going to have any chametz, we're not going to eat any chametz, and we're not going to own any chametz. And by the way, if you do that, you're actually welcome to say the second and final bittul of kol chamira at that time. However, for many people, if they're going to still have chametz in their possession, and they may eat some more chametz on Friday afternoon or Friday night and Shabbat morning before 10:30, so that's perfectly permissible, and so you don't have to do the bittul after the biur, after the burning, but you can do the bittul, and you should do the bittul on Shabbat morning prior to 11:45 a.m. What's the best approach for? Okay, so now we got through Thursday night, Friday morning. All the utensils that you want to kosher should be koshered before Shabbat. You should make sure to make the following preparations on Erev Shabbat. You should roast the egg and the zroa, the shank bone. You should check and clean the lettuce leaves. You want to chop the nuts for the charoset. You want to grate the horseradish, the maror. You want to prepare the salt water. So those are all the kinds of things that you want to do prior to Shabbat. And the reason for doing all those things, like roasting the egg and the zroa and the other things I just mentioned, and chopping the nuts for the charoset, is number one, because it's halachically problematic to do that on Shabbat. And number two, if you're going to say, oh, I could just do it Saturday night, well, then for Yontif, certainly many food preparations are permitted. There's still sort of some restrictions. I don't want to get into the weeds on some of these issues, but we also don't want to delay the start of the Seder, both for the adults and the children. And so for that reason, that's why I recommend doing those preparations on Erev Shabbat. what's the best approach for serving food on the Shabbat? So, as I said, the koshering of all appliances and utensils should be all completed, way prior to Shabbat. Due to the halachic and logistical challenge of cleaning chametz off pots and utensils on Shabbat, then for sure any foods that are going to be served hot should be made with kosher for Pesach ingredients and should be prepared and cooked only with kosher for Pesach utensils. All right, so you really should not have any hot chametz on Shabbat. That's for sure. Cold chametz is permissible. But to make life even easier, all food served at the meals, aside from the hamotzi, which will be, which we spoke about, all the food served at the meals, whether hot or cold, can be kosher for Pesach. So again, it's based on what you want to do. A person could say, you know what? Hold on one second. Getting a message here, a chat message. Okay, good. Okay, I'll get to those questions. Questions. What about kitniot, and also what about the sale of the chametz, which will let's make sure to come back to that. So what was I saying? That if a person's having the meals on Shabbat, so a person might say, you know what, I want to have for my Friday night meal, I'm going to have challah, and I'm going to have some chametz dishes, and there is a way, I guess, to maybe somehow warm up the food in a tin, and it could even be hot. So look, a person could take that approach of having chametz at their meal. I recommend not having hot chametz at the meals, just because it becomes problematic. But you could have challah with some chametz products Friday night or Shabbos morning for the first meal Shabbat morning. But to make life even easier, what you could do is that all food served at the meals, aside from the motzi, whether hot or cold, should be kosher for Pesach, even for the Friday night and Shabbat morning meal. And of course, after 10:30, then you're not allowed to eat chametz anymore. If one is eating challah or any chametz foods for the Friday night and Shabbat morning meal, so then I highly, highly recommend to use disposable plates and silverware. Silverware. Regarding the table that you use for your Shabbat meals, so I recommend eating on a table that won't be used for eating on Pesach, or even better, if you're able to eat on an outdoor table, if one is available. If eating indoors, you have to be careful to eat on a floor, over a floor that can be cleaned easily from crumbs. I don't know if you want to put out some plastic, or you just have to be careful to eat and be able to easily clean the crumbs, which we'll get to in a moment about cleaning up afterwards. If outdoors, so then crumbs can be swept away. That's tantamount to throwing the crumbs into the wind. That's considered a form of the destruction of chametz. And then also you're going to nullify the crumbs in your bittul, in your nullification. In whatever table you choose to eat on, if any chametz of any kind will be served, so then it's highly recommended that, aside from using disposable dishes, but use disposable plastic tablecloth to cover the table, and then the plastic tablecloth can be easily and carefully wrapped and discarded after the meal. Now, what you could do, so on Shabbat, for the Friday night and Shabbat morning meal, so you make the kiddush, you begin the meal with hamotzi, and you can begin the meal with the challah, as I said. One option for all of you to consider is the following. We're living in Los Angeles, so we're able to, eat outdoors, although it might be a little chilly. What you could do is make kiddush and hamotzi outdoors. If you want to have, a couple of things to have with the challah outdoors, and then, and this is either Friday night or Shabbat morning, you could then come inside the house and have a totally kosher Pesach meal inside the house. At the conclusion of the meal, you go back outside and you say Birchat Hamazon, you bench. So this way you're keeping all, the challah, you're keeping the challah and any chametz stuff that you're enjoying at the beginning of the meal, you're keeping it outside. You've eaten it on a disposable tablecloth. And then you're going inside and you're having, the meat, the chicken, the kugel, the salads, all the, whatever the kosher Pesach food you want to have for the meal. And so that could be done for Friday night. Let's say you have 4 people in your house. You might have 1, you might have 2, you might have 10. But what you do is you could have a challah roll per person, or you have 1 challah for the whole group with a and then a small challah roll with it because you want to make lechem mishnah. You have that outside. You try your best to complete the challah that you're eating outside, and then you come inside and you complete your meal. If you're welcome to continue your meal outside also. If it's comfortable enough to continue your meal outside, you're welcome to do so. Okay, and you're using disposable dishes, disposable utensils, and then either way you're going to wrap up that tablecloth outside, and you're going to discard it. Let's talk about discarding. So there's a few. This is interesting, and there's this war that we're engaged in the days leading up to Pesach of eradicating chametz. We battle against Amalek, but we also have this war against chametz. And so regarding chametz, again, an effort should be made in advance to serve an amount that will be consumed, so that little or nothing will be left over. But the remaining chametz can be disposed of in one of the following ways. If you have any remaining chametz, it could be given to a non-Jew if he or she will take it off your property. If it's a small amount, it may be crumbled and it could be flushed down the toilet. I apologize if that's not so pleasant thinking about that, but according to most, that's a legitimate destruction of chametz. I believe Rav Soloveitchik once said that he felt that was degrading. That was degrading to the food. But many other opinions say that with chametz, we burn it, we destroy it, we want to get rid of it. So we want to make it like dust and ashes. And so most assume that that's fine. If it's a small amount, it could be crumbled up and you flush it down the toilet. And the third option is that it can be discarded. It's in a bag, and you place it in your garbage bin at the very edge of your property. Someone pointed out to me that it says on the bin, property of Los Angeles. And moreover, when you place items in the bin, it's implicit that you're declaring it ownerless.
But you could put it outside your gate, just outside the gate of your backyard, and then it's hefker.
So you could do that. If you could put it off your property outside your gate, then do that. So put it off your property physically is best. And even if it's on the edge of your property, the bin itself is considered the property of Los Angeles. You're essentially implicitly declaring it ownerless. And anyway, you're including this in your nullification. Okay, you're doing the bittul. Okay, bittul is a real mechanism. The rabbis felt if you sincerely nullify something in your mind and you articulate it, even more so if you articulate and say kol chamira, that it should be ownerless and like dust of the earth, that's considered a destruction of the chametz. We don't rely only on that, but that's also significant. So Rashi understands that to be actually a fulfillment of the mitzvah of tashbisa. When you nullify it and make it like dust and ashes, it's a fulfillment of the mitzvah. And according to what Tosfot says no, that when you nullify it, you're making it ownerless, and it's a workaround. It does not. You're not going to be in violation of Bayir Rabbi and Matzeh of owning chametz because you've declared it null and void and you've declared it ownerless. However, it works, whether it's like making it like dust and ashes or whether it's making it ownerless. So that nullification is also significant. So you either give it to a non-Jew, you flush it down the toilet, or you place it in a garbage bin off your property, preferably. And if it's not totally off your property, as I said, I think it's fine. Regarding the disposable tablecloth that you've used, all right, so you wrap that up. You don't want to flush the disposable tablecloth down the toilet. That's not going to work out too well. But what you do is you put that in your garbage bin and off your property. You take the tablecloth and you put it off the property and you say kol chamira to do bittul on any possible crumbs that might be in the tablecloth or anywhere on your property. I want to share a couple of minutes about egg matzah, but I think so. We did Tanas Bechorim, we did Bedikat Chametz, we did Friday, which is Biur Chametz, before 11:45 a.m., and then you do the bittul. No, you don't recite bittul. We said you kasher your utensils, you make some of the preparations for the seder on Friday, and then we spoke just now about the different meals of Shabbat and how one best fulfills the meals while paying attention to the laws of Shabbat, while also adhering to the laws of Erev Pesach and the associated restrictions. One note about egg. I wanted to mention one note about egg matzah, and maybe kitniot, because somebody asked that in the chat. And number 3 about mechirat chametz, and then maybe take some questions. Egg matzah. So this could be an approach if somebody wants to have their home totally kosher Pesach for Shabbat. So you're able to do that. And the way to do that is that instead of having a challah or challah roll to begin your meal on Friday night and early Shabbos morning, you begin your meal with egg matzah. Rav Moshe Feinstein is clear that this is a permissible approach. He writes about it. You should use 2 egg matzot to fulfill lechem mishnah, and the egg matzah can be eaten as long as the chametz can be eaten. Now, our custom, this is an interesting discussion because our custom is to not eat egg matzah on Pesach unless one is elderly or ill and requires it for their diet. And while the custom for those who are healthy is to not eat egg matzah on Pesach, it's not considered chametz, and one is permitted to own it on Pesach. And that's why it makes it a desirable solution for some that, they don't want to have any, after Friday morning, they don't want to have, or certainly on Shabbos, they don't want to have any chametz in the house. They don't want to deal with challah. They don't want to deal with wrapping up tablecloths. They don't want to deal with eating outside, eating inside. So here's what you do. What you want to do is that you're welcome to. I'm not encouraging you to do this because you might say, hey, I have 8 days of missing out on challah and chametz. Why do I have to add a day? And I enjoy having challah with my guacamole or with my eggplant or with my salad or with whatever you're having on Friday night or Shabbos morning with your whole meal. You enjoy having challah with your soup. And there's a mitzvah, there's a concept of enjoying the Shabbat to the degree that we can. So it's certainly fine and nice to use challah rolls, but I certainly understand the perspective, the psychology of someone who says, you know what, I want to honor the Shabbos a little bit differently, and I'm going to start my meals with egg matzah. And that's fine. So you have 2 egg matzahs Friday night, you have 2 egg matzahs Shabbos morning, and then you either divide the meal into 2, or you just have 1 meal Shabbos morning, and then you make sure to finish the egg matzah by 10:30. You have other stuff after 10:30, and then you have just the fruit, the meat, or the fish in the afternoon. There is an opinion that says it's permissible to have egg matzah in the afternoon prior to Pesach. The custom is common custom is not to have egg matzah over the course of a Pesach, but Erev Pesach in the afternoon, the Aruch HaShulchan's of the opinion that it is permitted to have egg matzah, because the Rama makes a comment that you shouldn't have egg matzah in the afternoon prior to Pesach. But the Aruch HaShulchan and others understand this to mean that it's just really that since you can't have egg matzah on Pesach, why would you just have egg matzah just for that short amount of time? But if you do happen to have egg matzah, there is an opinion that says it's permitted on Erev Pesach. The mainstream majority opinion is that we don't have egg matzah on Pesach if you're healthy, and we also don't have egg matzah, after 4 hours of the day on Erev Pesach. I thought we said that you're not supposed to have matzah on the day before Pesach. The answer is that you're only not allowed to have matzah with which you can fulfill the mitzvah of matzah at the Seder. If you can fulfill the mitzvah of matzah at the Seder, and it's a poor man's bread, so then you're not allowed to have that matzah the day before Pesach. And as I said, some are refrained even earlier than that. But egg matzah, being made with eggs or fruit juices, whatever, it's made differently. It's made with eggs and fruit juices, not with water. So that egg matzah is it's not considered poor man's bread, and therefore you cannot fulfill. Everyone assumes you cannot fulfill the mitzvah of matzah at the Seder with egg matzah, and for that reason you are allowed to eat it the day prior. Again, as I said, there's a restriction because we generally don't eat egg matzah over the course of Pesach to be stringent, and some say that this stringency begins from the time of the prohibition of chametz. So based on these considerations, egg matzah is a great practical suggestion as a substitute for bread. That if you want to have your home kosher Pesach and you want to avoid eating chametz on Shabbat, what you do is you have egg matzah at the meals, and that's fine. Why? Because it's not chametz, it's hamotzi, and it's not viable for the mitzvah at the Seder, and therefore you could eat it, the day before Pesach, and so that's the concept of egg matzah. Kidneyot. Someone just said, what about kidneyot? Kidneyot, Sephardim, Sephardim eat kidneyot, like rice, soy, beans, corn. Sephardim eat kidneyot, but they're very, very careful about how they eat it. Ashkenazim, right? The custom of Ashkenazim is strong custom is to not eat kidneyot. Like rice, soy, corn, beans, and those types of things. But you're allowed to own kidneyot on Pesach. There's only the minig Ashkenaz is to not eat kidneyot, but you're allowed to own kidneyot. If somebody is a chola, is very sick and needs a kidneyot, then it would be permissible. For a child, it might be permissible. Ask a question about that. Someone wrote me a question about that. The chametz is sold. Okay, I wanted to mention about mechirat chametz. I conduct the transaction on Friday morning, but the sale goes into effect on Shabbat morning. So I conduct the sale the regular time on before 11:45 on Friday morning. On Friday morning I do the sale, but it only the sale goes into effect on Shabbat morning. And so as long as the food that you want to sell, right? So we number one, we burn the chametz Friday morning. We nullify the chametz both Thursday night and Shabbat morning. Okay, we and we do mechir, and we do bedikas chametz. We did bedikas chametz Thursday night, right? And we burn the chametz Friday morning, and we do the bittul Thursday night and Shabbat morning, the nullification. And we also, right? Most of us we do mechirat chametz. You appoint a rabbi, you appoint me. It'd be my privilege to serve as your agent to sell your chametz, and I will sell, any chametz that's in those designated locations on Shabbat morning. Those will be included in the sale. So if you put the chametz, if you happen to put the chametz Friday night into the cabinet that's going to be sold, that's fine. And anyway, I include all the chametz that are in those designated locations, and even some of the stuff that's not in those designated locations. Okay, here we have. Rifki wrote in, you can't have challah with the soup because your soup and dishes will most likely be Pesach dik. Well, most likely. But if the soup, if you serve the soup, right, in bowls, in plastic or paper bowls, right? We said you got to use plastic or paper. If you're gonna have challah or any chametz on Shabbos, you must use disposable plastic or paper dishes, plastic and paper, right? So you serve the soup, you carry, and let's say you're eating outside. And you want to, or wherever you're eating, but you're eating. So then, so the soup might be Pesach, but then you carry it to the table very carefully, and then you're going to throw out the dish. So,
Rabbi,
I'm not saying you have to have challah with the soup, but if you're using disposable dishes, then I don't see a problem. You've prepared the soup with a Pesach dika pot. The soup is Pesach dik. You take from the soup with a ladle and you put it into the plastic Kosher Pesach bowl, the 4 plastic Kosher Pesach bowls, wherever you're serving. You carry that plastic bowl with you to the table, and then you're fine. And then then you can do what you want with that soup. You eat it. You can have challah with it on Friday night or Shabbos morning for 10:31. As long as it's in a disposable plastic bowl and it's over a disposable plastic tablecloth, you're fine. Again, some people might not want to do that. Some people might not want to have any chametz on Shabbat. Some people might want to just have the challah at the beginning on a separate table outside. You have to know yourself. You have to also, be clear on the principles and the halachos, and you have to have a clear game plan. You have to have a game plan, right? It's a seder. It's a Pesach seder. Because you need to have Seder. Hakol b'Seder, everything's okay. Hakol b'Seder, everything's okay. And everything's also found in the Seder. And also, Hakol b'Seder means that we have to be organized all year long with a game plan. What's our schedule? What are our goals? What are the steps we need to take to achieve our goals? So you definitely need a Seder this year. All right, what else did Rifki write here? You won't be eating challah with your guacamole for the same reason.
Oh, okay.
No, for the same reason you can't have challah with your guacamole. Really guacamole with the challah. You don't want to, you certainly don't want to, you couldn't have put some guacamole on your challah. I don't see anything wrong with guacamole. So eating kitnios for Shabbos. That's fine until 10:30 a.m. Right? So for Friday night and until 10:30 a.m. you could eat kitnios. After 10:30 you should not eat kitnios.
I have a question, please.
Yes, let me open it up. Since Ayala has a question, I think I've covered most of the topics.
I have a question.
I hope it wasn't too confusing. As my teacher used to say in high school, it's clear as mud.
Right.
But let's get some questions.
So if you leave the house for Pesach, if you leave the house on Wednesday, Bdikat Chametz is not till Thursday. Do I need to do Bdikat Chametz in my house, or do we just go ahead and do it where we're going?
Okay, that's an interesting question. What I've usually recommended to people is that you can certainly take advantage of Mechirat Chametz to sell
Oh,
One
yes,
house.
that's, yes.
Okay. But then for part of your house, you should do bedikat chametz. And you do
Okay.
bedikat chametz the night before you go away from your home.
The
So
night
going
before,
away, if you're going away on Wednesday
should do it
and you're
Tuesday.
going across to the other coast, or you're going to be away from home, and you're going to a Pesach program, wherever you're going. So you should do bedika in your home, and if you're leaving on Wednesday, you do it Tuesday night without a blessing.
Without a blessing, okay.
Now, look, it is permissible for a person to to sell their whole house, and to sell all the chametz in the house. But then they're not doing the mitzvah bedika, and I usually don't recommend people to totally do that.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions?
I had the
Rabbi
same
Topp.
question. I had the same question, so
Nelly, okay. So does that answer it?
yes.
Okay, great. Thank you, Nelly.
You may have covered this. I'm sorry, I got pulled away from the kids, but I was wondering if we do eat kitnius on Shabbos, do we need to eat it outside, or is that allowed inside if we're using paper?
I'm sorry, Lisa, I was distracted because, I'm doing these two different platforms here. Say the question again. I'm sorry.
Oh, I was saying that if we use kitnius on Shabbos, do we need to do so outside, or are we allowed to do that inside if it's on paper?
I would treat kitnios as similar to chametz. I mean, it's not chametz, but I would treat it similar to chametz. But chametz is allowed to be eaten inside, as I said. So you're allowed to eat chametz inside, but carefully on a disposable tablecloth, preferably on a table that you're not going to be eating on Pesach. But you know what? If you're very careful about it, you can do so. And look, on a regular year, you eat chametz in the kitchen. The night before, the night before Pesach and the morning before Pesach, and then you clean it up and you sweep it up, and then you're eating there, that afternoon and that night on Pesach. You might eat in the dining room, of course, but you sometimes eat on the kitchen table too, or whatever. So you're also Shabbos is the day before Pesach. You're allowed to have chametz and you're allowed to have kitniyot. But you just want to have an amount of. But what's better, at least, about kitniyot is that it's not chametz, and so it's okay if you leave it over. There's no prohibition of owning kitniyot on Pesach. So kitniyot might be a nice idea, where you still have to finish it by 10:30, but it might be a little more reassuring to eat the kitniyot indoors. It's a little more relaxing. With chametz, I guess the stakes are a little bit higher. You have to be a little more careful with chametz to finish it up and to clean it up well. Kitniyot, you don't have to be as careful.
Okay,
Rabbi,
thank you.
Rabbi, if I want to sell my chametz, when can I do it and how?
Nelly, you named the time. Nelly Khan named the time, and the chametz will be taken care of. So what I'll do, Nelly, is I will send you a link. We sent it out in our emails, getting ready for Pesach. If you saw that email, look for Mechirat Chametz in there. But I'll be happy to send you an email with the link to the Mechirat Chametz online form. Most years we do it in person, but this year, based on a psak from Rav Shechter, with all the complications of being in person, is that you could do it online. Usually you do a kinyan, right? The giving of the pen or giving the handkerchief. The kinyan is not crucial. The kinyan really just solidifies the fact that you're appointing me as your agent to sell your chametz. The kinyan is to strengthen the fact, but you don't really need the kinyan as long as you're filling out a document and you're telling me you want me to be your agent. So then that's sufficient. Okay, so I'll send you the form. You fill it out. You submit it. I'll send you a confirmation. You're good to go.
Okay, thank you. Chag Sameach.
Okay, Chag Sameach. Okay, hold on. Let's see. will there be a public place to burn the chametz? And someone's asking me how to burn the chametz. You know, that's a tricky thing about the burning. I'm working with my neighbor, Rabbi Summers, who's right across the street. Rabbi Summers of Anshe Emet is the one who's taken the lead over the years in organizing it. He's working with Paul Koretz and the city council to try to arrange a location for the burning. So far, we haven't been successful in securing a location, but he just emailed me and Rabbi Muskin. He's keeping us updated. He sent us 2 emails today, and we're back and forth on it, and we'll let you know. If there's no community beer chametz, then if you want, you're welcome. If you have a small bag of chametz because you're attending this year and it's 9:15 and it's late at night and you've chosen to take time out of your schedule to join me, this is a real offer. You could drop off your bag of chametz by my house on Friday morning. There's a little more time this year because there's not as much of a rush. As you know, it's Friday morning, so if you're welcome to drop off your bag of chametz. I'm going to be burning my chametz in my grill in my backyard. I'm going to burn the chametz on the grill. It'll all be burned out, and then I'll take care of disposing the ashes and of course nullifying. I'm closing up the grill for Pesa. If you have a grill, you can use the grill to burn your chametz. If you have some fireproof, metal big can, and you know what you're doing, you just we'll have to send you. You have to check online how you start a safe little fire, to burn chametz with twigs and whatever it is, paper, and you burn the chametz. But again, that's a real offer. Really, you're welcome to. Me and my boys, we're going to take care of the burning of the chametz Friday morning, and your VIP elites for being on this year, you're welcome to drop off your bag of chametz, and I'll burn the chametz for you. Any other questions?